Complex space, um, iterative investigation is kind of is sort of what drives resolutions or conclusions or solutions out of that space, right? Do you think that the agilistas would be hammer nailing that, saying that everything can be driven into a complex space, given you have design choices, you have implementation choices, therefore anything could be considered complex?
So here's where I think that the Agilists and a lot of us get in trouble is that one of the things that you have to think about when you're using something like Cynefin is that what level of abstraction are you actually talking about? Right? When I get to writing lines of code, I should never be in the complex space.
Sure.
I should be some other space. I should be down in best practices, my naming of my variables. I should follow some best practices there. I shouldn't be going, wow, let's see how this naming emerges over time. Let me try this naming technique and then try this other naming technique and see what happens. It's nuts, right? So you just don't want to do that. And so what level of abstraction you're at. And so certainly if I go high enough level of abstraction on any kind of problem, I could probably get to a complex space where my possibility fields open up and new ideas come out.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think a lot of software is like that. And I think Steve might chime in here and tell me that's true too, is that I don't need to probe a lot because a lot of it's maybe just complicated. Yeah, there's lots of pieces moving on, but we have strategies to deal with this, and we can figure out a way to apply our either best practices or good strategies to move our way through this rather than just saying, what can we learn and how will the possibility space change based upon some basic principles that we're going to follow?
Well, yeah, I've been waiting to jump in here. To me, one of the core issues, I mean, essentially, this fits into the decision of what life cycle should I use, because I've always been of the opinion that there's no one size fits all development process. But I guess where I'm going with this is the idea that sure, there are some complex systems for which a research oriented, iterative kind of approach is really the right approach. But the issue is that there are a lot of systems out there where you think that they're complex because the approach that you take to them enhances or it just sort of amplifies the complexity when a different set of practices would minimize the complexity, and they're perfectly manageable. If they're not clear, they're at least sort of low end complicated zone. And so I like to talk about, if you will, a spectrum of life cycles with waterfall on one end and something more like the original extreme programming, or even strictly pure lean where I don't even have sprints on the other end, with the idea being that if I have a really clear problem, I mean, my favorite example here is accounts receivable. There just isn't that much variation in how organizations do accounts receivable. Yeah, there's a couple of questions that you need to clear out here. Are we doing cash accounting, or are we doing, what's the other one? I forgot.
Accrual.
Sorry?
Accrual.
Yeah, yeah. But you can get your arms around accounts receivable without a lot of effort. That is not an inherently complex problem all by itself. We have ways of, it's big, there's a lot of moving parts, but those moving parts are manageable. They have to fit together in certain ways. Where a truly research oriented, I like to say that even the customer doesn't know what they want until after we've built it. We don't know what the solution is until we've actually already built something that solves the problem acceptably. That there are problems that cover that whole spectrum. And you have projects, or you have problems that are kind of in the middle. To some extent, they're research oriented. To some extent, they're production oriented. And this is where you would want maybe sort of a hybrid life cycle, where you're talking about things like phase delivery, or example. I might go more evolutionary with something like Evo, or I might go less, evolutionary, more production oriented by doing sort of a strict phased release kind of approach. That there is no one size fits all. What drives the complexity is partly the inherent complexity in the problem, but there's a lot of induced complexity in how we try to solve the problem, and that if we try to solve problems in different ways, a lot of that complexity just goes away.